Heyo everybody, Haku here with kind of a news-ish, updatey sort of video. I really don't know how to even categorize a video like this because it's not the typical thing that I usually do. But I wanted to talk about the line Tower of God translation. I actually wanted to praise it a bit, and specifically I wanted to praise that they're going back through and really sort of proofreading and updating a lot of things in the older chapters if you go back through and reread. And I actually really like a lot of the changes they're making. But if you've been sticking with me for a while, you know that toward the beginning of the anime, I was talking about doing a video just to be informative, help the fan base out, talk about why some people in the fan base, because I know some people do still get confused with it, refer to some characters by some names and other people refer to them by other names. So I wanted to do an informational video on that, but I never got around to it, so I want to start this video off, try to keep it really short, but start off just giving some quick explanation of why there are these translation differences and name differences among people within the Tower of God community, then talk about some of the things that they have changed that we know for sure definitely they have changed, and then at the end, because I can't help myself, of course, I want to kind of open up the discussion a bit, talk about what I prefer as some of the name translations, and open this up for you in the comments to, talk about what you prefer, what you think is the better translation for some of these character names. But to start things off, to explain things, I've been reading Tower of God since I was a teenager in like 2011. We were right near the end of season 1, and back then the only really, really the only way to read in English was the company translation, a fan translation. And it went up until, my memory isn't quite 100% on this, I can't remember if the company translation stopped at the end of Workshop Battle before we started Helltrain, or if it was early on into Helltrain, but it was sometime within that short little span of time from the end of Workshop Battle to somewhere in Revolution Road, maybe. And it was basically stricken off the internet completely when Line took over and started it was always on Naver in Korean, but then Line started doing the English translation officially, and they basically struck all record, pretty much, of the company translation off the internet. I can't really find it anywhere to compare to the Line translation. But an issue that a lot of fans had with it at the time, and you can't really blame Line too much for this, is there were just tons of spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. A lot of names were translated differently, which is to be expected with different translators. But it just felt like, come on, go through and proofread and you can fix this up. Another thing that was nice, and this is something that's pretty consistent with fan translations, is the company translation really had a lot of translators' notes explaining what certain words were in Korean and why they decided to translate things certain ways. And I really think that when it comes to manga, when it comes to anything that's translated, I really appreciate that, and I wish more official translations did that, because very few of them do. So that's been another disconnect with the Line translation. But it seems, and here we're getting into this, that they've fixed so much of the spelling and grammatical errors, and it's really, really nice. It is so cool that that's all been fixed, and they've even gone back through and changed some of the name translations. Now, I started noticing this first when I was watching Milios's read-through of Tower of God before the anime started. And so I was watching that, and then I started taking notes for some videos of some of the older stuff. And when I started taking notes for videos, I noticed, wait, I just saw this in Emilio's video, and this is totally different. One of the big ones I noticed was that Yiwa, Yian Yiwa, was translated Y-I-H-W-A, which is the way it was translated in the company translation, and I had never remembered Line translating it that way. It was always E-H-W-A, which I didn't really like, because when I read that, my first instinct phonetically is to think Awa rather than Iwa or Yiwa. So that was the first big one I noticed. But then, since we now have some anime reactors who are now going through and reading the webtoon, I was watching some of Sun Wukong's streams. And watching his streams, I was like, okay, I just watched some of this stuff in Milios videos, and the translations are totally different. I even mentioned this on Twitter, and another Tower of God YouTuber, Dr. Bonehead, mentioned, because of course he does the Tower of God dub, and if you're not watching that, you should really go check it out. They've always done really good work on that. But he mentioned with the Tower of God dub that when they were going through to edit some of the videos, and this is the way I interpreted what he said, hopefully I'm not interpreting it wrong, but when they went through with the script they made given the lines, they went through, they had the voice actors record their lines, but then when they went to edit the videos and put the panels in and everything, some of the panels weren't matching up to the lines that they had spoken anymore, where the translation had been changed, it had been updated. So that's really cool. Now, some of the things that I know for sure have changed, going back through, they've changed Rob Devil to Rap Devil, and in the company translation it was always Rap Devil, and the line translation had changed it to Rob Devil. In early Season 2, Return of the Prince, there's still one instance of Rob Devil. I think it's on the screens for the strongest regular test, it still says Rob Devil. But in the translation, when they're speaking his name, they've changed it to Rap Devil. They've changed Awa, or the EHWA, to Yiwa, which I prefer so much. And it's just a few things like that. I feel like they've become more consistent with putting last names last. I still prefer last names first. Like, I prefer Ha Jinsung or Yu Han Sung to Jinsung Ha or Han Sung Yu. It's just me personal. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference. But it's interesting that they've changed some of these names like that. And here off the top of my head, I'm forgetting some of the other ones they've changed. But the point I'm making remains the same, of they've gone back to a lot of the ways that the names were translated. Or that's another example. They've gone back from Arc Raptor to Ak Raptor. It was always Ak Raptor or Ak Raptor, AK Raptor, in the company translation, but then they changed it to Arc Raptor, and now they've gone back to Ak Raptor. So I like some of these changes. So yeah, I look forward to more of that. I really hope they go through and just polish up the translation. All it takes is a little bit of proofreading here and there. I've even been like, I would do it for free, just to make it a more streamlined thing for more people reading. But yeah, I find it really interesting that they're going through and doing this now, probably because of the new popularity with the anime and all, but I'm really happy about it. Now, to put this at the end here, I'm going to talk about some of the different name translations you may have seen in the Tower of God community, and which ones of these name translations I prefer. It's okay to prefer different ones, and I'd actually be interested to hear what you think is the better translation of them, because some of them there's a bit of argument to be had. Some are just spelling differences, they don't really matter, like bomb with 2 A's versus bomb with 1 A. I prefer bomb with 2 A's. Again, it's just a personal preference. It doesn't really make a difference either way. I prefer it that way because BAM, to me as an American, makes me think BAM rather than bomb. But I think bomb is more phonetically correct, and I am not a phonetical genius. I don't know 100% what I'm talking about when it comes to Korean. But weirdly enough, one of the very few Korean people I've known, like face-to-face in real life, was a high school friend's college roommate, and his name was Bomb. And the way he explained to pronounce it, to pronounce his own name for what people should call him, it wasn't quite like a bomb. I feel like I'm butchering it, but there's a little more of a U in there. He was like, described it as almost like saying bum, but more than the sound. So like bum was around the way he told people to pronounce it and everything. So yeah, I prefer the double A, but again, that's just a spelling difference. It doesn't really matter. Same with the knock. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 2 A's there. One spelling difference I can't stand, I've been notorious for not liking, is HATZ, that just sounds like the plural of hats, but with a Z instead of an S, like it's some trendy 90s thing. I hate that translation. It should 100%, in my opinion, be Hatsu, HATSU, because I think even in some of the old CU blog posts, CU had mentioned having fans joke about how it sounds like an anime name, how Hatsu is a very samurai-esque type character. I just feel like Hatsu works so much better as a descriptor. Now, there's some argument to be had with Shibisu or Shiplisu. Again, I think that's all up to personal preference. I kind of prefer. It was originally Shiplisu in the company translation, but Line changed it to Shibisu. I prefer Shibisu, but I kind of prefer when there's a space in there. SHIB space ISU. Kun calls him Isu a lot, so it sort of makes sense that that's a last name and Sheeb or Ship is the first name or Sheep. So yeah, whether it's SHIP or B, either way works, and I think there should be a space there, and then whether it's Lisu, Yisu, Isu, any of that sort of kind of works. So I'm okay with the translation either way, but I prefer Shibisu over Shiplisu actually. Kunaguro Agnes was originally, and I still say Agaro instead of Aguero. It was originally translated in the company translation as Koon Agero Agi or Agnis, and I think now it's changed to Khun, which I prefer over the Koon. And we added in the U for Aguero rather than Agaro, even though I still say Agaro so often. And Agnes, I believe the line translation changed the I to an E in Agnes. So that's a difference. One massive difference is Endorsi versus Endrasi, and I think either of them work. From the way I've heard it pronounced phonetically, I think Endorsi works, I think Andrasi works. I think it's totally just up to a matter of personal opinion. I personally like Andrasi better, but I don't really think there's a difference to me. Maybe some of you have really strong opinions about it, but I think it works either way. And I've also seen it translated by some fans, like years ago especially, it was really common that I would see people spell it this way, is Ann Dorothy, just ANN space Dorothy. And I actually don't think that's a bad translation either. It's sort of like a Joaquin situation where even though technically the Korean letters or characters make it more like Joaquin, pronunciation somewhat like that, I always say Joaquin because the way that CU names characters, I'm like, that's the name that I assume he means. Like, if a character is David, I'm going to say David because I assume that's what he means. I'm not going to just say Davido every time or something, rather than just saying David because I'm sure it's what he means. Same with Joaquin. So Ann Dorothy, I don't think that's a bad translation. I don't know where that comes from, though. It might come from, like, a Spanish translation, because I know there were a lot of Spanish-speaking fans earlier in my days of doing YouTube that I used to see a lot more than I do now. I guess because Tower of God's got more popular and there are more people doing videos than me, of course. But yeah, so I don't know if that's maybe where it comes from, is a translation of another language and then they bring it over into the English fandom. But I have seen Ann Dorothy and I don't think that's a terrible translation either. Another big one is Zahard versus Jihad. Honestly, my personal opinion, I still use Zahard. I just don't like the name Jihad that much, and phonetically it's more like Zahado. So because that's more of the phonetics of it, I kind of like it starting with the Z. Even if it was Z-A-H-A-D, rather than Zahard, it's more Zahad. I still prefer the Z rather than the J to start it off. So that, again, personal opinion, I think it works either way. I just prefer the Zahard versus Jihad pronunciation. There are a lot more like that I want to know your opinions on, but I'm kind of struggling to think of more. I know Hatzling, again, the H-A-T-Z, what do they have with that? I prefer Hachuling, H-A-C-H-U-L-I-N-G. I prefer that translation for Kun Hachuling way more than the Hatzling translation, also known as Blueberry. I'm trying to think if there are any other big ones. I definitely prefer Varagarv, V-A-R-A-G-A-R-V, over Baragave, B-A-R-A-G-A-V-E. GAV and sometimes with an E at the end, but they weren't really consistent with that the line translation did. I definitely prefer the Vargarv translation. I know this is getting long-winded, but at this point, the people who watched at the beginning, you got the information on how they're changing things, and now it's kind of just turned into a discussion, because I want to know what you all have to say in the comments, and I want to talk with you there too. There was another big one that I wanted to bring up. Oh yeah, and this one isn't a translation difference between Line and the company. This is a translation difference between Line and Line. Line originally translated one of Yama's subordinates as Berdych, Berdych, and then changed the translation to Verdici, Verdici. I actually prefer the Berdych translation for the same reason where I was like, I think it's what they're trying to say. Because Verdych's weapons look like smaller versions of the weapon a Bardiche that's spelled similarly but with an A instead of an E. So I kind of feel like that's maybe where CU was trying to get inspiration for the name from, so I kind of prefer that. And most of all, just remember, whatever you want to call these characters, I don't think people should get too toxic or make too big of a deal about it, because even me, there are certain things where I am just set in my ways of totally pronouncing it wrong. Like, I always say Wangnan rather than Wangnan, which is probably a much better way to pronounce it. I've just become so used to saying Wangnan that I always say it that way. Same with Grace Merche Luslek. I always say Merche. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Mercia, but I always say Merche instead of Mercia. So they're totally things that are bound to stay different, but I think it's really, really cool how Line is going through and changing some of these name translations back to what they used to be. Back to some of the ones that I think are better. Although, like I said, I think some of the Line ones were better than the company ones. So again, it just depends. Some are better in one, some are better in the other. Some, like Andrassi versus Endorsi, don't matter either way, but you better believe, though I say it doesn't matter either way, if they changed the official translation to Andrassi, I would lose it. I would go nuts. Or if they officially changed HATZ back to Hatsu, if they went to Hatsu, it would be over. I would never say a bad thing, anything critical about the translation ever again. I would just be so happy if it went back to being Hatsu. But yeah, I just wanted to do this video to praise them for some of these changes. Like, the name changes don't matter as much, it's just something really interesting from a fandom point of view. But the thing I wanted to get across was just to praise them for going through and fixing some of the grammatical errors, fixing some of the spelling errors. I think for new fans, having the translation, it seems a bit unprofessional when there's all these mistakes. Like I said, it's something that you can't really avoid too much, because like I said, Line started doing the official translation when we were already like in workshop battle, so they had nearly 200 chapters that they had to like speed translate. Now of course some of these changes, it's like there's like not really much of an excuse, like when they started off calling Baylord Yama Baylode Yama for some reason. Again, it's like, it's a fandom point of view sort of thing. Like, if you've been a fan of Tower of God for a long time, you know it's like, oh, it's Baylord Yama. But phonetically, I'm sure there's not much of a difference between Baylode and Baylord when it comes to the original. But yeah, either way, this turned into like a 4 times longer video than I expected. But that's because I sort of shifted my thinking it from, do I just want to be informative, or do I also want to make it into a discussion? And I kind of always tend to go for the discussion thing. I want to talk to all of you about your opinions on all this in the comments, so let me know if you like some of the changes they've made, or if you think they should make more changes, which name translations you prefer, between the old school ones like Sahard and Andrassi, or the newer ones like Endorsi or Jihad. If there's anything like that, I'd love to hear some of the opinions of other people on this. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Like if you did like the video, comment down there. Tell me what you thought about any of this. Subscribe for more. Tower of God, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated there and stuff for the channel or talk to you there, though I usually do that more here on YouTube on the community tab now. If you want a link to the Discord server, just ask and I can give you one. It's free and open for anyone. And if you'd like to help support the channel so I can keep making Tower of God videos and much, much more, it's patreon.com/Haku of the Tubes, or a link will be in the description. That is it. Thank you for watching and sticking through this if you have, and I'll see you all next time.